Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest on the legal arguments and political wrangling over Boris Johnson's plan to keep himself in power a few months more by tearing up the international treaty that brought him his power in the first place, the Northern Ireland Protocol. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the bill designed to trash the Northern Ireland Protocol has been published now. And it's actually going to disapply the entire protocol. We didn't know how much of the protocol it was going to target. We do now. All of it. So it seems that Liz Truss got her way, because it was reported that Boris Johnson wanted it toning down a little. In other words, he wanted to do the... We know that he doesn't really want to do this. He's doing it because of political pressure. So he wanted it to be as weak as possible. But Liz Truss wanted to go full insanity because she is trying to appeal to the far right of the party for the inevitable leadership contest at some point. And given that the bill as published disapplies the whole protocol, that would suggest full insanity to me. Now, you may see reports that it just removes most of the protocol, that there's actually a few little bits left. The bits that are left are arrangements that existed before the withdrawal agreement. They already existed. Then they weren't actually part of the protocol as such. They're just in. It's a little bit like, and I'll talk about this in a future video, human rights laws that the government are attacking at the moment is part of the Good Friday Agreement. But we didn't negotiate those human rights laws as part of the Good Friday Agreement. They're just in the treaty. And the EU has also now announced that it will restart its legal action against the UK with an emphasis on the smuggling that is being allowed from Britain to Northern Ireland, where there's a risk of goods, some of which are highly illegal, like weapons and drugs, getting into the single market. And I'll be discussing that in a later video. I'm going to wait to see if I can find out a little bit more information on that as well. And so in this video, I'm going to be looking at the UK government's rather shaky legal arguments and explain where I think it goes wrong. So this is a classic case of intertwining politics and legality. And I discussed both to a certain extent on Monday. Politics is essentially about persuading people to let you do something. Legality is about persuading the courts to let you do something. Now, as you can probably appreciate, populists and fascists tend not to do well on legal arguments because it's knowledgeable people who are considering them. Yes, those people can be corrupted, absolutely, but they're still knowledgeable. Whereas politics involves persuading people who mostly are not at all knowledgeable about what you're discussing. So in politics, you can persuade both the corrupt and the principled in equal measure. You can get principled voters to vote against their own interests. But only the corrupt are targetable in courts. So fascist governments always seek to control the courts. Unrelated note, Boris Johnson promised to do this in his 2019 manifesto. So yeah, let's watch for that. But this Northern Ireland Protocol bill makes its political arguments through legal arguments. They tried something similar before, not on as grand a scale, but they tried something similar last year, but they admitted that it broke international law. That made it impossible to get through Parliament. MPs allowed it through, it was disgraceful enough, but the Lords went, what, is illegal? No, you can't do this. So now what the government are trying to say is this bill is legal. Oh no, actually we've had a look at it and we're doing something even more extreme than last year, but this time it's perfectly legal. So what's the argument? Well, the first thing to note is that the government are trying to release as little detail about the legal arguments as possible, which is always a curious situation when the government insists that what seems to be illegal is actually legal, but they're not going to tell you what their legal advice was. The government claim that it is usual not to publish their legal advice, which is true. That is true. But at the same time, when there's a lot of head scratching going on, it would probably just be easy if they did. But the main argument being presented to Tory MPs is that the Good Friday Agreement takes precedence over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And so the protocol can be amended in order to preserve the more important Good Friday Agreement. More on that in another video. Now, I'm not legally trained, so I'm not going to try and go down a legal rabbit hole here, but I will point out two things. Firstly, if the Northern Ireland Protocol impinged on the Good Friday Agreement, I would have expected three things to happen. First, I'd have expected the UK to have negotiated a different agreement in the first place. If you care about the Good Friday Agreement, why did you sign a treaty that breaches it? And the government can't claim unforeseen aspects of the treaty because it was pored over by the best legal minds in the UK and the wider EU really for several years. The second thing I'd expect is that the Irish government would not have agreed. We may doubt the commitment of Boris Johnson's government to the Good Friday Agreement, but surely not the Irish government. As EU members, they could have blocked the withdrawal agreement if they felt it breached the Good Friday Agreement. Remember, the wider EU is a co-signatory of it as well. The US would have also raised some issues, but they didn't. The US was in support of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Third, I would have expected a court to confirm that the Northern Ireland Protocol impinges on the Good Friday Agreement, because there's plenty of Brexiteers have gone to court to try and prove that the protocol is unlawful using all sorts of arguments, which is absolutely fine, no problem at all. They've tried various legal arguments and they've all failed. So there seems to be no case law that the Northern Ireland Protocol does contradict the Good Friday Agreement at all, even if you would suggest one treaty takes precedence over the other. But then the second thing to point out on legal matters, expand on that idea of court cases. So like I say, Brexiteers have gone to court to have the protocol declared unlawful a few times now. One of them, recent ones, involved arguing that it was at odds with the Act of Union, Ireland Act 1800, as well as the Good Friday Agreement. And sure enough, if you read the Act of Union 1800, which obviously only concerns Northern Ireland these days, it does seem to be at odds. You can look at it and go, yeah, actually, this doesn't seem entirely consistent at all. But the High Court in Belfast determined that the more modern treaty overrides an earlier one. For good measure, it did also explicitly state that the withdrawal agreement did not breach aspects of the Good Friday Agreement brought up in the arguments either. The judgment's quite interesting, actually. It's probably worth reading the last few pages, even for non-lawyers. But the key point is that the court case made clear that the Northern Ireland Protocol changed other UK laws and treaties. So arguing that the Good Friday Agreement takes precedence and allows them to change the protocol is a nonsense. Because if the protocol could change the Act of Union 1800 because it was more recent, it could change the Good Friday Agreement. But you might say, but the Good Friday Agreement is an international treaty. Yes, with Ireland. And Ireland also signed up to the Northern Ireland Protocol. More than it, they want it preserved right now. So even if someone could make a legal argument that the more recent withdrawal agreement somehow did conflict with the Good Friday Agreement, and I remind you that everyone who has tried to make this legal argument in court has failed so far, but even if someone eventually did get that view established in law, the situation would still be that it would be the withdrawal agreement that takes precedence because it is more recent. It was agreed by the same governments who signed up to the Good Friday Agreement. It's not uncommon for one law or treaty to inadvertently modify earlier laws or treaties. We've had that established. So both of the legal arguments from the government that have been publicly explained seem to be at odds with legal reality. Now, obviously, as I say, I can't confidently say that this is definitely the case because I'm not a lawyer, much less a lawyer with expertise in this specific area. But what I can see is court judgments of the like I've linked in the description below shooting down these arguments. And I think, therefore, I can be confident that the government are not on solid ground here. Completely apart from the fact that their top legal advisor refuses to go along with it. But the reality is that the legal argument is neither here nor there. If the government is breaching international law, it would be for an international court to deal with it. And international courts tend to not only take quite a long time to deal with these things, but against powerful countries tend not to be able to do a great deal anyway. Certainly Johnson is unlikely to believe the whole thing will run its course, because by the time the international legal case concludes, he will expect to have either re-established his authority in the UK, in which he won't care what an international court says, or he'll be out of office, in which case it's someone else's problem. So this bill will run a political course. The first political hurdle was getting Tory MPs to support it. Now, technically that hasn't happened yet, but from what I can see reported, ministers seem confident that they are going to have that support. There's not expected to be a large-scale rebellion against this bill, according to reports. Now, Johnson's team have misjudged the room before. It could be that potential rebels are just keeping their cards close to their chest in order to lull the whips into a false sense of security, rather than give them lots of times to lay an ambush. I don't know. But there doesn't seem to be large-scale attacks on this proposed legislation from within the Tory ranks. So as things stand, the chances are you would have to say that the legislation would pass through the House of Commons. But it's a long process. And the internal politics of the Tory party is in such flux right now, it's likely to change considerably in that time. But for now, we would say it'll probably get through. At which point, the next two political hurdles are the reaction of the House of Lords and the reaction of the EU. Now, the House of Lords is certain to block this legislation if it is made absolutely clear that it breaches international law, because they've already done that with a much weaker form of legislation. So that case has to be made clear, and there's plenty of time to do this. Like I say, this bill is going to take a long time to pass through Parliament, if it ever does. Sometimes bills can be passed through very quickly if the government really wants it, but they're not doing that. They're just taking the usual path with this. Again, remember, Johnson doesn't want it passing quickly. And don't imagine that because Johnson has now pressed the button that we're going to get towards the end game of this Brexit madness. We're a way off yet. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.